Welcome back to another tutorial. Today we're going to go over the value option description driver component as well as the reference option description driver component. Those are a mouthful, so I'm going to try and not say them too many times. Look at the video title if you've forgotten what that was. It's a very long-winded component name. These components are very useful for making UI look good in response to values within your UI, such as modes or numbers or settings, etc. They do it quite intuitively in a way that makes it easy to sort of update the UI, and there's no LogiX involved. It's just one component, and it's kind of magic, to be honest. I'm going to show you what I mean by providing an example here. This is a button which right now is saying 5 on it. Let me just align that for the view. When I click this button, you'll see it changes to a blue button that says the word potato. I'm going to click it again, and you'll see it's a green button that says the word taco. There is no LogiX at play here. This is just one component. Actually, it's multiple components, but it's one component that's doing the visual display, the value option description driver. So let's recreate this button, and I'll show you how it works. So for this, you're just going to need a developer tooltip here, which I'm going to equip. And I'm going to turn to some space here, and I'm going to create a button. For that, we're going to go to the Create New menu and go to Object, New UI Button, which has a standard button. We're now going to inspect this button, so aim your laser at it and hit secondary, and then go to Open Inspector, and you'll see that the button has appeared. First of all, you need to make the button do something, and what we're going to do here is just have it cycle through some values. I go over this in my video on button value cycle, but we're going to use it in this video as well, so I might as well go over it. So we're going to go to, first of all, we need a place to store the value that button represents. We're going to go to Attach Component, Data, Value Field Float here. These will all be added sort of towards the bottom, so scroll down till you see them. There's our value field. And then we're going to add the button value cycle component. Again, there's a video on that in the video description. Attach component, common UI, button interactions, button value cycle. And for the type here, just put in float, because that's the data type we just made for that value field. And then you'll see it says target value here. Just drop in the value here. And then for the values, we're just going to add 3 values, and these are just going to increment. You don't necessarily have to use button value cycle here, but I wanted to use it because it's a little bit easier to keep control over the values. There are other types of button value blank, and those videos are linked in the video description as well. Now that this is set up, you'll see that when I push the button, this value field increments to match with the values in the value list. At this point, we'll be diverging into the value option description driver content, so this will be the new stuff. For value option description driver, the component gets quite lengthy, so I recommend putting the value option description driver on a different slot. So to do that, I've got the button at the top selected. I'm going to hit star, which will create a new child, and I'm going to rename this to be option descriptions. Now that this is created, we can add that component. So we go to Attach Component, Common UI, Drivers, and then Value Option Description Driver. When this is created, you need to specify a data type. We are playing around with a float type in the button, so we'll also need a float here. Now that we've got this open, you'll see that there's a lot of fields to specify. To help us out here, what we're going to do is create a second inspector that has the button so that we can modify its values. So for that, go to the top where it says button, put your cursor on it, and then grab and push primary, and now you've got a second inspector which is targeting the button. The value option description driver needs a few of these properties set up before it starts working. The most important one being value. So scroll down to where the value of the button is, which is this value field where it says 3. And we're going to drag the value into the value over here. So we're going to put our laser on value, we're going to hit grab and drop it into value over here. Next, it's asking for label. Label you can find within the button. So in the button, expand the button within the button. I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but there you go. And you'll see that there's a text slot here. Go into that and drag in the text from the text renderer into the text of the label, into the box where it says null next to label. And you'll see that it gets set. The button will go blank at this point. Don't worry, that's fine. Go back up to the button here, because the next one we're going to drop in is the color. So scroll to the top of the button, and you'll see that the button has a color property. So we're going to drop the color property here into the color property of the value option description driver. That's all we need right now. The other properties such as sprite, sprite URL, and sprite tint, these are useful when dealing with things like UIX. This isn't a UIX tutorial though, so we're just going to leave it here. Now let's start looking at what the value option description driver does. So you'll first of all see that there is a default option here. This will set all of the values above based on the reference value, and it's deemed to be the default one because you don't need to add it to the option list below. So right now the value of the button is, let's double check over here, the value of the button is probably 0. Yes, it's actually 3. So let's hit it a few times until it goes back around to 0. So there you go, now it's on 0. And now we'll say that when the button has a value of 0, we want the label to read, say 0 as a text. And we want its color to be, let's say, red. So we can set this to red. And we're done. So what this is now doing is it's saying when the reference value is 0, so when the value that we've set here is 0, set the label to be 0 and the color to be red. Now that might look that magic now, but if we start to add more options, you'll see it gets quite powerful. So let's now add an option. This option here needs a different reference value. So I'm going to enter 1 here, and then we'll say a different label value here. Let's go for, again, the textual version of that number, so 1, and let's make this a different color. Let's say pink. I'm going to make that fully visible as well. And now you'll see that it starts at 0, and that's because it's using the default option with the reference value of 0. And then when I click this, you'll see that it's going to pink, and it's immediately saying 1. And this is because the component here, ValueOptionDescriptionDriver, is detecting that the value, which is the value field over here, is now 1. And it's saying, okay, I will change the value of the label of the button to be 1, and the color to be pink. And we can keep going as many values as you want here. So I'm going to hit an add and add another one. And here we're going to specify 2. And again, we'll use the textual representation of 2 as in TWO. And then we'll use the color. Let's go for, I don't know, a nice orange. And hit OK. And now when you hit again, you'll see it's now orange with 2. And now that cycling is working. You'll see that there's a gap where we push it twice and it stays on 0. And that's because we don't have a value specified for 3. So when we get to 3, it'll actually say 0 because it's going back to the default value. So what it's looking at here is it's saying, hey, the value field is 3, but I don't have anything in my list which references 3. So I'm going to fall back to the default value up here. We can change that by adding another one for 3 here. So 3, we'll do a label of 3. And then we can do a color here of, whatever this is, cyan. Yes, there we go. And now you'll see it says 3 with that cyan label. And now you'll see that we don't get 0 twice. 0 is only there for 0. I hope that makes sense. It's super powerful to change what the UI looks like based on the value that you're looking at. This could be a mode or a size or like a switch that you might have within your setup. You can also use ValueOptionDescriptionDriver with other data types such as booleans or colors or text, etc. So you can change all sorts of things based on on a button based on the value that you're specifying. You can also use references for this. I will add, but we won't set it up, the reference option description driver. Here's reference option description driver. Again, you'll need a type here. So for example, let's use, just think of something that will work quite easily here. Slot will work. I used a Turk's keyboard there to set the slot. I haven't gone over how you set custom keyboards, so maybe I'll do that next. But you can just type the word slot in here, and then you'll get a reference option description driver for a slot. And so if we look at the options here, instead of looking for a reference value, it's looking for a reference target. So instead of setting a value here, you just set a slot here. And then you can do exactly the same thing here. So say that's button 1. We can use I don't know, controllers for the number 1 there. So now if we set up the button to loop through, say, references, again, the button's values would respond to the references as though if they matched the reference listed here. I won't set that up longer as we've got to, specify the label, color, sprite, all that stuff again. But that just to show you that that reference option description driver does exist and it does work for reference data types. That's all I've got for you. That component is a very long-winded name for a component, but it's very useful. I do hope that you'll use it in your UI. It does prevent you from needing to do a lot of management of what your UI looks like. As we go into the sort of UIX world, which will eventually go there, that'll come up as a topic. It'll be like trying to minimize the amount of logic you have to do or the amount of components you have to do to make your UI look good, and instead maximizing what the UI actually functionally does to the world. So you don't want to spend a bunch of time making everything look pretty. You just want it to do something cool but also look pretty easily, and this component gives you that ability. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.